locked away. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I started searching through the old paperwork in the downstairs study. I wanted to know the name of the girl from the photographs. I wanted to know what had happened to her mother. Most importantly, I wanted to know what connection she had to my mother-in-law. After several hours, I found an old envelope containing documents from decades earlier. There was a name on one of them. It was the same name I had seen on the photograph. The document was related to a change of guardianship. The little girl had apparently been taken care of by another family. But there was something strange. Margaret's name appeared on the paperwork. She had been involved. I could not understand why. Then I found another document. It changed everything. The girl's mother had not abandoned her. She had not disappeared voluntarily. She had been trying to protect her daughter, and Margaret had known. I kept reading. The details were incomplete, but I could piece together enough of the story. Years ago, the woman in the photographs had been going through a difficult period in her life. She had a young daughter and very little support. Margaret had helped her daughter at least. That was how the story appeared at first, but something had gone wrong. The woman had eventually left the house, her daughter remained behind, and after that, the family stopped speaking about her. I found one final note tucked inside the back of the folder. It was written in Margaret's handwriting. It was not addressed to anyone. It simply described a promise she had made many years earlier. A promise to keep the truth hidden until the little girl was old enough to decide for herself whether she wanted to know what had happened. I stared at the page. The little girl was no longer a child. She would be an adult now. And if Margaret had kept her promise all these years, there had to be a reason. That evening, I finally understood something else. The secret was not really about the past. It was about someone who was still alive. Someone who might still be connected to my family. I began to wonder whether the woman from the photographs had ever been found. I also wondered whether Margaret had been protecting the woman, or protecting the girl. The following weekend, I returned to the old house alone. I went upstairs again. This time, I opened the room without hesitation. I looked through the photographs more carefully. One of them was different. It had been placed inside a small frame and hidden behind the books. The photograph showed the little girl as an adult. She was standing in front of a completely different house. On the back was an address, and beneath the address was a recent date. The date was only 2 years old. That meant Margaret had known where she was. I suddenly realized that the woman I had been searching for might not be the person who held the biggest secret. The real secret was the daughter, the little girl in the photographs, the woman who had grown up somewhere else, the woman Margaret had quietly followed for decades. I took the photograph with me. I knew it was wrong, but I also knew I could no longer pretend that I had not seen it. The next morning, I searched for the address, and what I discovered made my heart stop. The woman in the photograph was living only a few hours away. She had been there for years, and according to the information I found, she had recently changed her surname. She was using a name I recognized, a name that appeared in my husband's family history. That was the moment I realized this story was much closer to my own life than I had ever imagined. And I knew I could no longer leave the locked room alone. I spent the entire night thinking about the name I had discovered. It was impossible to ignore. The woman from the photograph had changed her surname to a name that appeared in my husband's family history. At first, I convinced myself it had to be a coincidence. But there were too many coincidences already. The locked room, the photographs, the old documents, the promise Margaret had written about, and the address that had been written on the back of that photograph only 2 years earlier. I decided that I needed to understand the entire story before confronting Margaret. So I went back through everything I had found. The oldest documents revealed that the woman in the photographs had been named Claire. Claire had grown up in the house and had always been very close to Margaret. The little girl was her daughter, Lily. For years, I had assumed Margaret's family had always been small. But the truth was that Lily had once been part of it. She had been raised by another family after Claire became unable to care for her. That was the official explanation. But the notes inside the locked room told a different story. Claire had not wanted to give up her daughter. She had believed she was making a temporary decision while trying to rebuild her life. Margaret had promised to take care of Lily until Claire was ready. But then Claire disappeared, not physically. She had simply stopped returning to the house. She stopped answering letters. She stopped asking about Lily. Margaret believed Claire had abandoned her daughter. Years later, Margaret learned that Claire had been searching for Lily the entire time. The two women had simply been unable to find each other. A series of misunderstandings, old addresses, and decisions made by other people had kept them apart. The truth was heartbreaking because there had never been one great betrayal. There had only been years of silence. And that silence had changed several lives. But there was one part of the story I still did not understand. Why had Margaret kept the locked room untouched? The answer was in the final notebook. Margaret had written that the room had belonged to Lily when she was a child. She had kept everything there because she wanted Lily to have a place to return to if she ever came back. She had never known whether that day would come, and apparently it had. The recent photograph was proof. Lily had returned to the area. She had even contacted Margaret. But Margaret had never told anyone, not even her own son. I finally understood why. She was afraid. Not of Lily. She was afraid that revealing the truth would destroy the family she had built afterward. She believed her son would feel betrayed. She believed he would blame her for keeping such an enormous secret. But there was something else, something I had completely missed. I found one final photograph hidden beneath the floorboard of the room. It showed Lily standing beside Margaret. They were both older, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in any of the earlier photographs. They were smiling. On the back of the photograph was a date from the previous year, and underneath it, Margaret had written a sentence explaining that Lily had finally forgiven her. That changed everything. Margaret had not been hiding Lily because she was ashamed of her. She had been waiting for Lily to decide what happened next. I realized then that the locked room was not a symbol of some terrible family secret. It was a place Margaret had preserved because she could not bring herself to destroy the last evidence of a relationship she had once believed was lost forever. I still had the photograph in my hands when I heard footsteps downstairs. Margaret had returned. This time, I did not hide. I went downstairs and placed the photograph on the table. I did not accuse her. I simply left the photograph there. Margaret looked at it. Then she sat down. For several minutes, neither of us moved. I could see that she understood exactly what I had discovered. Eventually, she gave me the rest of the story. She had met Lily again several years earlier. At first, Lily had been angry. She believed Margaret had deliberately kept her away from her mother. But as they slowly uncovered old letters and documents, Lily discovered that Margaret had actually tried to find Claire many times. The problem was that Claire had also been searching. Both women had spent years believing the other had chosen to walk away. The misunderstanding had lasted for decades. Eventually, Lily found her mother. Claire was older and living quietly in another state. Their reunion had been difficult. It had not magically repaired the years they had lost. But they had finally been able to speak openly about what had happened. Margaret had visited them. That was why she had recently been traveling so often. She had not been visiting the old house to hide something. She had been preserving the house. Because it was the only place that still connected all three women to the life they had once shared. I asked Margaret why she had never told me. Her answer was not complicated. She believed some stories belonged to the people who had lived them. She had not wanted to tell her son's wife about something that Lily had not yet chosen to make public. I understood. For the first time, the locked room did not feel frightening. It felt sad and strangely beautiful. A few weeks later, Margaret gave me the key. She told me that I no longer needed permission to open the room, but I did not open it immediately. Instead, I waited. When I finally entered, I saw the room differently. The same bed, the same desk, the same photographs, but there was something new. A small bouquet of fresh flowers stood on the windowsill. I knew immediately who had left them. Lily had been there. She had finally returned to the room where her childhood memories had been preserved for so many years. And that was when I understood the real meaning of the locked door. It had never been locked to keep people out. It had been locked to keep something safe. A memory, a promise, and a part of a family that had spent decades believing it was lost. I used to think that secrets were always dangerous. Now I believe some secrets are simply unfinished stories. Sometimes people keep the past hidden because they are ashamed. Sometimes they do it because they are afraid. And sometimes they keep it hidden because they are waiting for the right moment to give someone back a piece of their own life. I never looked at my mother-in-law the same way again. Before that experience, I had thought of her as a distant and somewhat difficult woman. Afterward, I saw someone who had carried an old promise for most of her life. She had made mistakes, she had kept too much to herself, but she had also protected something she believed was important. The locked room remained in the house. We never turned it into a guest room or storage space. It became something else, a place where old photographs, letters, and memories could remain. And sometimes, when I visit the house, I still walk upstairs and open the door. The room no longer feels mysterious. It feels peaceful, because now I know what was behind it. Not a terrible secret, not a family scandal, just a story that had waited many years to be told. And perhaps that is why my mother-in-law never wanted me to open that door. She knew that once I saw what was inside, I would never see our family the same way again.